Can a lifeline, meant to save you, become a death sentence? On the icy slopes of Dhaulagiri, that question was answered in the most terrifying way possible. Alexander Dushenko, Oleg Kruglov, Vladimir Chistikov, Mikhail Nosenko, and Dmitry Shpilevoy. Remember these names. These weren't tourists. They were the climbing elite. But the mountain's treacherous blue ice turned their brotherhood into a fatal chain. How could a single rope drag 5 professionals into an icy abyss? And how did their greatest strength become their fatal flaw? Imagine a mountain that forgives no mistakes. 5 men stand at the base of Dhaulagiri, gazing upward. This isn't a vacation for them. It's not just some pretty picture for Instagram. These aren't commercial climbers, the kind who pay a fortune to be practically hauled up to the summit. This is the real deal, a true sporting elite, a team where every single member understands the stakes. While other expeditions rely on huge support teams and bottled oxygen, this 5-man crew chooses the purest, most demanding path, alpine style. It sounds romantic, but at 8,000 meters, it means complete isolation. There's no army of Sherpas to carry your gear. Support from the outside world is cut to an absolute minimum. Most of them deliberately climb without supplemental oxygen. They breathe the same thin, rarefied air as the mountain itself. It's an old-school challenge. They're here to prove that the Soviet style of climbing, where grit, endurance, and pure skill are everything, is still alive and well. They rely on nothing but themselves and the person tied to the same rope. Dushenko leads the way, confident in every man's training. They seem unbreakable. After all, each of them has some of the world's toughest climbs under his belt. But Dhaulagiri is a mountain with a personality of its own. It watches these bold climbers, and it has a test in store for them, one where sheer willpower might not be enough. 8,167 meters. It's just a dry statistic in an encyclopedia. But here, in Nepal, that altitude feels like a physical pressure, one that can literally crush a person. Dhaulagiri is known as the White Mountain for a reason. But in the autumn of 2024, it's not showing these climbers a white face, but a sinister, icy snarl. Imagine you're standing on the roof of a skyscraper, but this roof is sloped, perfectly smooth, and made of bulletproof glass. That's exactly what the slope looks like right now. This phenomenon is known as blue ice. This isn't the kind of brittle ice you see in a spring puddle. This is a substance compressed over centuries, as hard as concrete, and nearly impossible to drive any kind of safety anchor into. The sharp steel points of their crampons can't bite into it. They just skate across the surface with a sickening, vibrating scrape. But the most terrifying part of this situation is the optical illusion. This concrete-like skating rink is dusted with a thin layer of fresh snow. The mountain is camouflaging its trap. It looks like there's solid fern ahead, a safe place to plant your foot. A climber takes a step, shifts his weight, and in that same instant, the ground beneath him vanishes. His foot shoots out from under him, like slipping on a patch of black ice. Except, this isn't a city street. Beneath that slip is a drop of over a kilometer. This fall, the weather is behaving like a temperamental machine with broken gears. Up on the summit, the winds are howling with enough force to sweep a person away like a dry leaf. The forecasts change every few hours, forcing the team at base camp to constantly rethink their strategy. Experienced guides on other expeditions are shaking their heads, telling everyone to pack it in. But this team of 5 sees a chance. What's known in the climbing world as a weather window is opening up. It's a brief period of calm, a tiny crack in the mountain's defenses. The clock is ticking against them. They don't have a week to wait it out. They can't afford a slow pace. It's now or never. These conditions demand absolute technical perfection. This isn't some simple trek, like you often see in the Everest movies. Every single move is a complex dance between muscle and gear. One misplaced crampon, one ice screw not set just right, and gravity instantly wins the debate. The slopes of Dhaulagiri become a giant slalom course, where the price of a mistake isn't a lost medal. It's your life. The team understands that here, safety is an illusion. On ice this hard, even the most solid anchors can pop right out during a fall. They begin the summit push, knowing full well they're entering a zone where a single slip could be fatal for the entire team. The mountain seems to be holding its breath, offering them a narrow path. But no one knows if that door is about to slam shut behind them. 6 of them push into the death zone. But one of them listens to his gut and turns back, a decision that will save his life. They're at Camp 4, at 7,400 meters. The air here is so thin, every single step is a struggle. The team prepares for the final push. But then, something in this well-oiled machine starts to grind. Valery Chamelot, a veteran mountaineer, feels it. Something is wrong. His body is sending him warning signs. Signals a novice might just brush off as simple fatigue. But Chamelot knows what these signals mean. He makes the hardest decision an athlete can make, to turn back, just one step away from his dream. He turns around and begins his descent. At that moment, he has no idea that his guardian angel is literally pulling him back from the edge of the abyss. Valery heads down, while the other 5 continue toward the summit. Now they are 5, and it's here that they make a tactical decision, one that will prove to be fatal. Instead of fixing ropes, lines anchored to the mountain that each climber can clip into individually, they decide to rope up together. This is a classic rope team. A single long rope connects them all at the waist. In theory, it's a safety measure. If one person slips, the others can hold the fall. It's the ultimate act of trust, a brotherhood bound by nylon. But on the blue ice of Dhaulagiri, the laws of physics work differently. The rope, meant to save them, becomes a death trap for the entire team. They climb higher, 7,600 meters. The team begins a traverse, a dangerous section where they have to move sideways across the slope, not up. Underfoot is that same unforgiving ice, as hard as steel. On terrain like this, there is no room for error. And then, it happens. The one thing every climber dreads. One of the team members loses their footing. Maybe a crampon catches on a rock, or a boot just slips on a patch of ice, and they fall. On soft snow, they could have self-arrested with their ice axe. But here, the slope is like a giant slide. The falling climber gains speed in an instant. The rope snaps taut. There's a jolt of incredible force. The shock literally rips the second climber off their feet before they even realize what's happening. The weight of 2 climbers pulls down the third. It's a chain reaction, and there's no stopping it. Imagine the weight of 5 grown men in full gear. That's nearly half a ton, hurtling down an icy slope. No amount of human strength, no muscle power, could possibly hold that much weight on a slippery incline. The rope is no longer a safety line. It's dragging them all into the abyss. The team becomes a single tangled mass, careening downwards, smashing against the rocky outcrops. They plummet hundreds of meters. The altitude drops catastrophically. 7,500, 7,200, 7,000. Dhaulagiri's gravity gives them no chance to hold on until their terrifying fall finally ends, far, far below, on the snowfield at the base of the slope. The radio goes silent, and that silence is louder than any hurricane. October 6th becomes the point of no return. At base camp, no one leaves the radios, listening to the empty crackle of static. With every passing hour, hope gives way to a cold, dawning horror, because at 8,000 meters, time is not on your side. 2 days of uncertainty drag on like an eternity. Finally, on October 8th, the weather clears enough for a helicopter to take off, to scan the endless fields of white. The pilot scans the blinding snow, and then, his eyes lock onto specks of color at 7,100 meters. It's not forgotten gear or tents, it's them. The team of 5 has been found. The scene from the air is horrifying in its fatal geometry. The bodies are lying on the snowfield below, all of them still connected by a single rope. No one unclipped. The rope never broke. The very nylon cord that was meant to be their lifeline had, in the end, dragged them all to a single grave. It's a terrifying illustration of how the noble principle of one for all can become a death sentence. Analyzing the position of the bodies and the terrain, experts came to a single, chilling conclusion. The tragedy was caused by a fatal error in their safety strategy. Being roped together on a steep, icy slope like this, it's like playing Russian roulette with a fully loaded chamber. On a flat glacier, being roped together saves you from falling into a crevasse. But here, on the blue ice of Dhaulagiri, physics is working against them. When one person falls, they become a human projectile. There's no way to self-arrest, no way to slow down. The jolt travels to the next person instantly, without warning. The second and third climbers don't have a split second to react. to brace themselves. They're simply ripped from their stance by the sheer force of the momentum. A team doesn't fall because all five of them made a mistake. They fall because one of them did. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake at all. Just a cruel twist of fate, a loose rock, a sudden gust of wind, a crampon losing its grip. The Dhaulagiri tragedy is a brutal reminder to the entire climbing community of the dangers of shared responsibility on the world's highest peaks. Instead of using fixed ropes where each climber is responsible for their own safety, they put their lives in each other's hands, and on a single, shared rope. And the mountain exploited that trust. 5 strong, highly skilled climbers, gone in an instant, bound together until the very end by a single, fatal decision. What's the real price of a perfect photo for social media? For 31-year-old Huang Lihong, the cost was everything. We're in East Java, at the crater of the Ijen volcano. Her husband, Zhang Yong, was looking through the lens, waiting to capture his wife's smile. Instead, he witnessed her vanish into a 75-meter-deep chasm of acid. But the most terrifying part of this story? It wasn't the elements that claimed Huang's life. Her fate was sealed by a single item of clothing, an item many of you might wear just for the aesthetic. How did the hunt for likes turn into a nightmare in a single second? Let's piece together the timeline of this tragedy. Sometimes, a single click of a camera shutter is all it takes to cost someone the rest of their life. We're in East Java, at the foot of the Ijen volcano. This is a place where beauty borders on madness, and the air is thick with the biting stench of sulfur, a smell that catches in the back of your throat. Among the dozens of tourists bundled up in warm jackets, our eyes are immediately drawn to one figure. This is our subject, a traveler from China. She has that telltale glint in her eye, the one every hunter for the perfect shot knows so well. She isn't here just for a stroll. She has a mission. Walking beside her is her husband, Zhang Yong. They look like a happy, well-matched couple who flew to Indonesia for a new adventure. They're sticking with a large, organized tour group, but in their minds, they're already far ahead, at the summit. Huang checks her phone, adjusts her hair. She's clearly nervous, but it's a good kind of excitement. In just a few hours, as the sun begins to rise over the horizon, she plans to take a photo that will be the envy of all her followers. But look closer at what Huang is wearing, and right here, we see the first sign of trouble. While experienced guides are checking the laces on their trekking boots and other tourists are zipping up practical windbreakers, Huang has chosen a very different outfit. She's wearing a long, flowing skirt. It's a choice made for aesthetics, for that ethereal look against the harsh, rocky backdrop. The fabric flutters beautifully in the wind, but here, among sharp stones and unpredictable terrain, the clothing looks alien. It's a direct challenge to common sense. The group begins to move. The climb up Ijen is no walk in the park. The path twists and turns, the incline growing steeper with every step. We can see Huang having to gather the hem of her skirt in one hand. The fabric of her dress keeps snagging on the brush, tangling around her legs. It's awkward, it's draining, but she doesn't complain. Far from it, she's resolute. In her mind, the final shot is already perfectly composed. She's standing by the famous dead tree, an iconic spot for every Instagram tourist. With its gnarled branches, the tree hangs right over the crater's edge, creating the perfect dramatic frame for a picture. And that's exactly where Huang is headed. Her husband helps her navigate the tricky parts, at times almost pulling her along by the hand. It's pitch black all around them, the beams of their headlamps the only thing cutting through the gloom, revealing patches of the rocky trail. Breathing is getting harder, not just from the altitude, but from the sulfuric fumes wafting up from deep within the volcano. But Huang Lihong doesn't stop. She pushes on toward her goal, with no idea that this sunrise will become unforgettable for a reason she could never have imagined. Imagine a giant bowl filled to the brim with acid that looks like the purest turquoise, but is strong enough to dissolve metal. We're standing on the very rim of the Ijen volcano. This is a place where nature offers no second chances, and it's the stage for the tragedy about to unfold. The landscape is otherworldly, yellow sulfur deposits, billowing steam, and the famous blue flame that transforms the mountain into an ethereal light show after dark. But now, in the light of day, the true face of this place is revealed, raw and utterly untamed. This isn't some tourist attraction where a park administration is looking out for your safety. Ijen has become a mecca for bloggers and social media thrill seekers from all over the world. Feeds are flooded with shots against the backdrop of this acid lake, but the Instagram filters hide one terrifying detail. There are no guardrails here, no railings, no warning tape, no safety nets to catch you if you slip. You're standing on the edge of a precipice, and the only thing between you and the abyss is your own awareness and your sense of balance. The group's guide, a local who knows every rock on this mountain, can feel the tension rising. He sees the tourists, intoxicated by the beauty and the desire for the perfect shot, inching closer and closer to the edge. He repeats his warnings, over and over. His voice is anxious, shouting over the wind, "Be careful! Don't get too close! The rocks are slippery." But the problem is, when you're looking at the world through a smartphone screen, your sense of danger gets dulled. The lens flattens reality into the rectangle of the frame, pushing aside the fact that just inches from the sole of your shoe is a fatal drop. Look down into this rocky gorge. The drop here is about 75 meters. To give you a sense of scale, that's the height of a 25-story building. And at the bottom, there's no water or soft earth waiting for you. The floor of this part of the crater is littered with razor-sharp volcanic rock and hardened lava. It's a hostile environment, where the chances of surviving a fall are next to zero. This entire area, it's a zone of personal responsibility. The guide can yell, he can wave his arms, but he can't physically stop every single person who decides to step back for that perfect shot. The ground beneath your feet is treacherous. It's a mix of sand, loose gravel, and dry brush. It might feel solid, but it can suddenly shift under your weight. And it's in this setting, surrounded by a majestic but unforgiving beauty, that our subject, Huang Lihong, gets closer to that famous dead tree. She sees the perfect picture, but the mountain sees just another fragile visitor, forgetting caution at the edge of a precipice. 6 a.m. It's the moment when the golden sunrise over Ijin transforms from a majestic natural wonder into the backdrop for an irreversible nightmare. The group finally reaches the summit. The sun is just beginning to break through the thick plumes of sulfuric smoke, painting the sky in soft, pastel hues. This is it, the golden hour that photographers all over the world chase. Huang Lihong, forgetting the exhaustion of the long climb, hurries toward her goal. And there it is, the famous dead tree. Its twisted barkless trunk looks like the skeleton of some ancient creature, frozen in a permanent bow before the crater. Huang gets into position. At first, she's sensible. She stands about 2 to 3 meters from the edge. This is the safe zone. The ground here is solid, and even if she got dizzy, there's room to maneuver. Her husband, Zhang Yong, raises his camera. He's looking for the right angle, telling her how to turn her head. But something's not right. Through the viewfinder, the shot just doesn't look epic enough. The tree isn't fully in the frame, or maybe the volcanic smoke is obscuring the background. Huang decides she needs a little more space for that perfect composition. And that's when it happens, the very thing their guide had been dreading. The guide, watching the scene unfold, feels his stomach tighten. He sees the distance between the tourist and the 70-meter chasm shrinking. He screams. His voice, filled with alarm, cuts through the morning air. "Stop! It's dangerous! Get back!" This is the moment of truth, when reality tries to break through to someone lost in the thrill of the moment. But Huang is in a state of euphoria. She hears the voice, but she probably thinks she has everything under control. She takes one more small step back. Just one step. And this is where the ticking time bomb she put on back at the hotel finally goes off. The long, beautiful skirt, designed to flow dramatically in the wind, becomes a death trap. Huang shifts her weight onto her back foot, trying to strike a more relaxed pose. The heel of her shoe catches the hem of that flowing fabric. It happens in a split second. Her leg is instantly tangled in her own clothing. Imagine the horror. She goes to put her weight on that foot, but the fabric stops her from making a full step. Her body, expecting solid ground, instead meets resistance. Her center of gravity shifts backward into nothing but empty air. The most terrifying part of this is that she's standing with her back to the edge of a cliff. She has absolutely no chance to see the danger, to gauge the distance, or to grab onto a branch of that very tree. Her arms instinctively fly up, trying to find her balance, but they only clutch at air thick with sulfur. Zhang Yong is watching his wife through the camera lens. He's about to press the shutter to capture her smile against the rising sun. Instead, he witnesses his wife simply disappear from the frame. She doesn't stumble. She literally topples backward, like a rag doll. Gravity takes hold instantly, giving her not even a second to realize what's happening. A moment ago, she was there, beautiful and happy. And now, all her husband sees is an empty space by a withered tree and settling dust on the cliff's edge. The tragedy unfolded in complete silence, broken only by the sound of the wind. A freefall from 75 meters leaves no room for a miracle, only for the brutal laws of physics. Huang Lihong's body plummets into the abyss, striking the jagged rock faces on the way down. This isn't the flight of a bird. It's the chaotic, destructive tumble of a doll thrown from a skyscraper. Every impact against the hard volcanic rock steals away another chance at survival. The silence of the crater is broken only by the sound of cascading pebbles, an echo that spreads through the gorge, a sound more terrifying than any scream. Down below, at the bottom of this stone basin, time moves differently. For the rescuers, a living hell is about to begin. This isn't a typical extraction, where you can just pull up an ambulance. We see the emergency response team unfurling ropes and preparing a stretcher. They have to descend into a place no sane person would ever go, a zone with a high concentration of toxic gases and unstable ground. The operation to recover her body stretches on for 2 agonizingly long hours. Just imagine those 120 minutes. 120 minutes of a team of men in respirators, slowly making their way down a sheer cliff face, meter by meter, risking a fall themselves. The rescuers are pushing themselves to their absolute limit. The terrain here is so treacherous that even their professional gear can barely keep them anchored to the slope. By the time they finally reach Huang, medicine is powerless. The doctors who examine her body after the ascent can only state the inevitable: multiple fractures and injuries incompatible with life. Death was almost instantaneous, occurring even before she reached the bottom. That so-called picturesque location became her execution ground, where gravity carried out the sentence. Meanwhile, back at the top, another tragedy is unfolding, an emotional one. Zhang Yong, her husband, is in a state of profound shock. Witnesses describe a gut-wrenching scene. A grown man, who just lost the woman he loves, descending into uncontrollable hysterics. He's slamming his head against the hospital walls, trying to inflict physical pain to drown out the agony tearing him apart from the inside. He was holding the camera. He saw her take that step. And so, guilt and grief mix into a lethal cocktail, unraveling his mind right there, in front of the medics and the police. The official ruling comes down quickly. It was an accident. No foul play. No malicious intent. The report dryly states, safety protocol violation. But behind that cold official jargon lies a simple and brutal truth. What caused her death wasn't the volcano, but something far more mundane. Human carelessness and a bad outfit choice. That long skirt, worn for a few social media likes, proved to be a fatal mistake. Her story is a grim reminder to anyone who packs a bag for the mountains. The peaks are indifferent to your beauty, and they never ever forgive a lack of proper gear. Can $70,000 buy you life in a place where the air itself can kill you? For a top executive from Nairobi, Cheruyot Kirui, Everest became not a trophy, but an icy grave. He decided to conquer the death zone without supplemental oxygen, and when his guide, Nawang Sherpa, begged him to accept help, the banker, in a fatal state of euphoria, pushed the life-saving mask away. The outcome is chilling. The millionaire's body, frozen near the summit, while his would-be rescuer vanished without a trace into the abyss. How did an iron will and a fortune lead to the season's most horrific mistake? 40 years of a flawless life, exchanged for an icy void in a single moment. We're in Nairobi, inside the gleaming offices of the KCB Group. Here, surrounded by air-conditioned comfort and important reports, we find Cheruyot Kirui. To his colleagues, he's a successful top executive, a man in a perfectly pressed suit who oversees vast sums of money. But the moment the workday is over, this man trades his dress shoes for running sneakers. Kirui doesn't just enjoy sports, he lives at the very edge of human endurance. Ultramarathons, grueling distances that would break the average person in the first 10 kilometers. For him, that's just a warm-up. But eventually, running on solid ground is no longer enough. His gaze turns upward, to where the atmosphere ends and the void of space begins. Everest. But Kirui has no interest in being just another tourist, hauled to the summit on a rope. He has a plan, one that borders on insanity. He decides to go without supplemental oxygen. Just think about that. At the same altitude where commercial airliners cruise, he's planning to breathe air with only 1/3 of the oxygen necessary for life. This is an elite club of climbers, one that only a handful can enter, and from which the exit often leads directly into eternity. Up there, your body doesn't just get tired, it begins to slowly shut down, minute by minute. Kirui approaches this challenge with a banker's precision. He invests a colossal sum in his dream. Somewhere between $50,000 and $70,000 leaves his accounts. That's the price of a nice car, or a down payment on a luxury apartment. But he spends that money on ice, wind, and pure risk. To minimize the chances of disaster, he hires a personal insurance policy, an experienced guide named Nawang Sherpa. Nawang is meant to be his shadow, his guardian angel, and the one person who has the authority to call it all off. His friends are starting to notice this is more than just a hobby. It's become an obsession. There's a frightening fire in the banker's eyes. There are whispers of a bet, that there's more on the line than just ambition. He's making a deal with the mountain, convinced his iron will and marathoner's experience can somehow cheat his own physiology. Kirui believes he can buy a ticket to the roof of the world and come back without paying too high a price. But Everest doesn't accept bank transfers. Imagine slowly suffocating, but feeling absolute boundless joy at the same time. This isn't the start of a horror movie. It's the physical reality of the place he's heading. We're ascending into the so-called death zone. Above 8,000 meters, the rules of the game change, fundamentally. Here, on the edge of the stratosphere, human life is an anomaly, a glitch in the system. Even with full oxygen tanks on their backs, climbers here aren't living. They're slowly dying. Every cell in the body is screaming for help. Your reserves just evaporate. But Kirui decides to voluntarily give up his only lifeline. He's going without oxygen. To put this in perspective, at the summit of Everest, the atmospheric pressure drops so low that the air molecules are spread incredibly far apart. Every breath you take contains only 1/3 of the oxygen our lungs are used to at sea level. The brain, our body's central computer, finds itself in a state of severe starvation. And this is where the truly terrifying part begins. Hypoxia is an insidious enemy. It doesn't arrive with pain, it arrives with euphoria. You start to feel all-powerful. You feel like you're full of energy, that the summit is just within arm's reach, and the pack on your back suddenly feels weightless. It's a trick, an illusion created by a fading mind. A climber might start having nonsensical conversations with invisible companions, see hallucinations, or, worst of all, lose their coordination. One wrong move, one dizzy step into the void, and it's all over. In this state, people often just sit down in the snow to rest, convinced they're warm and comfortable, and they never get up again. Kirui, despite his marathon runner's endurance and the iron discipline of a top executive, is choosing the most difficult style of ascent, one that only a handful of professionals with years of acclimatization can even attempt. He's trying to leap across a chasm with no running start. Down below, in Nairobi, success was measured by the numbers in a bank account and smart investments. But up here, at 8,800 meters, the currency is different. The mountain doesn't care how much your gear costs or what you paid for your permit. The only thing that matters is your mitochondria's ability to generate energy in a vacuum. Time flows differently here. At this altitude, you don't have days or weeks. You only have the golden hours. A handful of hours before the irreversible processes in your body just switch off the lights. The body begins to eat itself, burning muscle just to keep the heart beating. Kirui isn't racing against rivals. He's racing against his own physiology, and with every minute, with every foot of the ascent, a countdown begins. And that timer is ticking inside his head with every single step he takes, up into the thin, freezing air. The night of May 21st into the 22nd marks the point of no return. The moment ambition slams into the icy wall of reality. We're transported to the slope, to a zone where every single movement demands a superhuman effort. Cheruiyot, Kirui, and Nawang Sherpa are beginning their final push for the summit. All around them is absolute darkness. pierced only by the beams of their headlamps, which snatch glimpses of loose snow and rock from the void. At first, everything is going to plan, but Everest knows how to wait. The problems start where most people would already be turning back, at the balcony at an altitude of 8,400 meters. It's a place often called the Graveyard of Hopes, and it's here that the rhythm of their ascent begins to falter. Na Wang's experienced eye spots trouble instantly. Kirui, this iron marathoner, suddenly loses his pace. His movements become ragged, uncertain, as if he's walking on the deck of a ship in a storm, not on a solid slope. He starts to fall behind, taking strange pauses. This isn't just fatigue. His brain is beginning to shut down. Na Wang grabs his radio. An urgent message crackles over the air to base camp. The client is behaving erratically. He's unsteady on his feet, and he isn't responding to simple questions. Down in base camp, they instantly assess the situation. The reply comes back, sharp and non-negotiable, like the crack of a whip. Get him on oxygen, immediately. The expedition managers understand. The games are over. A life is on the line. Following orders, Na Wang pulls out the life-saving mask. It's a ticket down, a guarantee they'll make it back alive. He tries to fit the mask over Kirui's face, but he's met with resistance. Just imagine it. On the edge of oblivion, struggling to breathe, a man is pushing away the very thing that could save him. Kirui refuses. In his oxygen-starved mind, using oxygen is cheating. It violates the purity of his mission. He remembers his goal, the stakes, the fair ascent. To him, a breath from a tank means defeat, a defeat more terrifying than death. The banker persists, rejecting salvation for a principle that here, at the cruising altitude of a jetliner, seems like absolute insanity. They continue to crawl upward. Communication with the duo becomes spotty, their voices lost in static. The last contact comes near the famous Hillary Step, at an elevation of 8,790 meters. It's a narrow, rocky ridge, the final barrier before the summit. The radio crackles to life one final time, and the message they receive is blood-chilling. It says the client is absolutely refusing to come down. The summit is so close, it's calling to him, and Kirui can probably already taste victory. And then, the radio goes silent. A long, heavy silence. The kind of silence that, on Everest, almost always means the worst has happened. Rescuers would later find the body of Sheruio Kirui. He lies just a few dozen meters from his dream, on the very roof of the world, forever frozen in his moment of triumph and tragedy. But he's alone. Na Wang Sherpa, the man who tried to save him until the very last second, has vanished. He didn't abandon his client to die alone, staying with him to the very end, and Everest claimed him without a trace, leaving us with only questions about the price of loyalty and professional duty. The highest point on the planet is now his grave, frozen in eternal, icy silence. His family in Kenya receives the terrible news, and they're faced with a choice you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. Do they leave a husband, a father, and a son up there, among the snows? Or do they try to bring him home? The decision they make is a heavy one, but it's the only one they can. Sheruio, Kirui's body, will remain on the mountain. This might sound cruel, but only to those who don't understand the harsh math of Everest. At an altitude of nearly 9 kilometers, a human body becomes an impossible burden. Bringing just one body down from a place where the air is dangerously thin requires a team of 6, sometimes even 10, highly skilled Sherpas. Every single one of them would be risking their own life, balancing on a knife's edge between life and death. The family understands. You can't trade the lives of the living for the return of the dead. Everest doesn't give up those it claims without a fight. But what about Na Wang? Rescue teams scan the slope, but all they see is an endless expanse of white. Na Wang Sherpa, the faithful guide, had simply vanished. The most likely scenario is that while fighting for his client's life, or perhaps just trying to hold his ground on a narrow ridge in zero visibility, he slipped and fell into the abyss. His body now likely rests at the bottom of some bottomless crevasse, a place the sun will never touch. This is the tragedy of a true professional. Na Wang wasn't chasing a record, he was doing his job. He stayed with his client when every instinct must have been screaming at him to get down. He died trying to force an oxygen mask onto a man who was fighting him off. It's the ultimate act of duty, and he paid for it with everything he had. This story serves as a brutal lesson for the entire world of mountaineering. We see the myth of infinite resources come crashing down. Kirui was wealthy, successful, and perfectly equipped. He could afford the best gear and the best guide. But up there, on the Hillary Step, his bank account meant nothing. Money can't buy you more red blood cells, and it can't force your brain to function without oxygen. Physiology is the only law that matters in the death zone, and it doesn't take appeals. This disaster wasn't caused by an avalanche or a hurricane. It was triggered by a single, obsessive idea. His fanatical refusal to use supplemental oxygen at the critical moment, just as his body was beginning to shut down, was the final trigger. Altitude sickness is insidious. It shuts down fear and logic, leaving behind nothing but raw, baseless ambition. Kirui, blinded by how close he was to the summit, simply didn't believe he was dying. The same will to win that helped him build a career and run marathons played a cruel trick on him up here, replacing his instinct for self-preservation with an illusion of control. Two people remain on the mountain forever, a stark reminder to all who follow. The summit is only half the journey. And on Everest, a client is only right when they're alive. Can a matter of principle weighing just 200 grams be worth a life? For Usuk Jargal Tsedendamba and Purav Surin Lakag Vajav on the slopes of Everest, the answer proved fatal. These two achieved the impossible, summiting without supplemental oxygen. But it wasn't a moment of weakness that sealed their fate. It was their refusal to carry a simple radio. While other teams, warned of the coming storm, turned back, they kept climbing, walking straight into an icy trap, completely cut off from the world. How did their greatest triumph become a silent tragedy? One that nobody would realize until it was far too late. Everest doesn't forgive overconfidence. But these two gazed at the summit with a chilling, icy calm. Base camp is a hive of activity, but Usuk Jargal Tsedendamba and Purav Surin Lakag Vajav keep to themselves. One is 53, the other just 31. There's no novice fear in their eyes, just a steely resolve and a plan that has the veteran guides exchanging nervous glances. They aren't here as tourists. While other expeditions check their oxygen tanks and meet their personal guides, the Mongolian climbers do something many consider insane. They sign up for the cheapest, most bare-bones service package available. The paperwork says it all. Base camp only. What that means is, beyond a certain point, they're on their own. Completely on their own. The baffled organizers try to explain the risks. A standard ascent involves a massive support team, a constant supply of oxygen, and safety lines at every step. But Usuk Jargal and Purav Surin are adamant. Their response is blunt and direct. We are professionals. They don't need babysitters to hold their hands to the summit. Their goal is a pure, athletic climb. No supplemental oxygen, no personal Sherpas to carry their packs. Just their own muscles, their own lungs, and their own will. But the most heated argument erupts over a small device weighing just a few hundred grams. A walkie-talkie. The agency staff practically beg the men to take a communication device. At an altitude where the air is so thin, your brain starts to fail. Being able to say a single word can be the difference between life and death. The organizers insist, they pressure, they plead, but the climbers are counting every single gram. To them, a radio is just dead weight. Useless cargo that will only slow them down when every step is a battle. In this battle of wills, their stubbornness wins. They flatly refuse to carry a radio. The decision is final. They are deliberately cutting themselves off from the outside world. Usuk Jargal and Purav Surin gather their gear, preparing to step into the zone of eternal ice and thin air. Now, if anything goes wrong, no one down below will ever know. They are walking into a silence so profound that screaming is pointless, because there is no one there to hear. May 12th. Nightfall. The mountain holds its breath, like a predator poised to strike, as Usuk Jargal and Purav Surin step out of Camp 4 at an altitude of 8,000 meters. All around them is darkness, pierced only by the beams of their headlamps. The air is so thin, you have to literally fight for every single breath. But the climbers are making good time. The hard fern crunches underfoot, and overhead, the stars are still burning bright. It feels as if Everest is on their side, but this illusion of safety, it's the most treacherous trap of the high altitudes. By morning, on May 13th, the scene changes in an instant. The wind doesn't come in gusts, but as a solid, icy wall. The wind speed climbs rapidly, turning tiny ice particles into thousands of microscopic blades that slice at their faces, even through their masks. This isn't just bad weather anymore. It's the start of a storm. The one meteorologists down at base camp are now screaming about over the radio. And at that very moment, a drama is unfolding on the slopes, completely unseen by the two climbers. Down below, in the warmth of their tents, other expedition leaders are staring at the weather reports in disbelief. The radio channels erupt with commands. Guides from the commercial groups get a direct order. Turn back. Get down now. The summit is closed. The risk has become mathematically unjustifiable. And on the slope, a surreal procession begins. The lines of headlamps that were crawling towards the summit, towards their dream just an hour ago, now grind to a halt. And then they begin to slowly stream back down to camp. Climbers who paid tens of thousands of dollars are weeping with frustration. But they obey the voice on the radio and turn back. But two Mongolian climbers keep going up. They are moving against the tide. They see the other teams descending, see the guides waving their arms, pointing up at the sky, then pointing down. But at 8,500 meters, in the grip of hypoxia, gestures are hard to interpret. No one can stop Usuk Jargal and Purev Surin with just their voice. They don't have the one thing that could save their lives. A lifeline back to the world below. Their pockets are empty. No radio chirp, no crackle of static, no command to stop. They are in a total information vacuum. To them, this wind is just another obstacle to overcome, like every other hardship they've faced in their lives. They think it's just a temporary downturn in the weather, a typical whim of the mountain. They don't know what everyone else knows. This isn't a squall, it's a cyclone. With every 100 meters they climb, the gap between them and the rest of the world widens. The backs of the other climbers vanish into the swirling snow below. Now, on the entire massive ridge of Everest, battered by all the winds of the planet, only two tiny figures remain. They keep pushing upward, right into the heart of the storm, confident in their own strength as the tempest around them builds to its full, terrifying power. An eerie, ringing silence blankets the slopes after the storm passes, as rescue teams finally head out to search. One day passes, then another, and a third. At base camp, hope is melting away faster than snow in the sun, replaced by the grim acceptance of the inevitable. Sherpas scour the route, peering into the white emptiness, trying to tell the difference between a rock and a human body. And then, at a terrifying altitude, the mountain gives up its captives. The first one they find is Usuk Jargal. He's at an altitude of 8,600 meters, just shy of the south summit. This is a place where every single step demands a superhuman effort. The rescue team finds him, suspended from a safety line. He isn't lying down, not curled into a ball. He's frozen mid-stride. It's as if he just paused to catch his breath and simply fell asleep. His posture tells a story. He was fighting to the very last second, trying to get down. But his energy just vanished, instantly, like someone flipping a switch in a dark room. Further down, near the area known as the balcony, at 8,300 meters, they find the second climber, the younger one, Purev Surin. They're separated by several hundred vertical meters. That's a massive gap. It's clear that at some point, the two of them separated. Purev Surin, the younger of the two, had managed to get further down than his partner. He was fighting through exhaustion, trying to reach the oxygen supplies or any help waiting at Camp 4. But his own reserves ran dry. He freezes on the slope forever, never making it to the safety of his tent. It seems like a story of complete failure, until one of the Sherpas pulls a phone from his jacket pocket. The device powers on. The screen glows with a cold light, revealing a truth that is absolutely breathtaking. In the photo gallery, there's a picture. It shows Usuk Jargal and Purev Surin standing on the very top of the world. And in that instant, the entire story is turned on its head. This wasn't a failed attempt. They'd made it. With no oxygen, no support, against all forecasts and all logic, the Mongolian climbers had reached 8,848 meters. They stood at an altitude where jets fly, looking down on the world below. That photograph becomes the silent proof of their triumph. Experts piecing together the timeline realized the bitter truth. The men gave the climb everything they had, absolutely everything. At that altitude, without supplemental oxygen, the human body is like a battery in freezing cold. They had just enough energy to get to the top and take that one photo, but for the descent, which in mountaineering is always harder and more dangerous than the climb up, they had nothing left. No calories, no warmth, no will to go on. They had conquered Everest, but that victory was a trap. Their bodies, completely depleted, simply shut down in the brutal cold and thin air. And so, they remain there, on the slopes, eternal guardians of their own audacious dream. But the euphoria over that heroic summit photo quickly gives way to a harsh, cold analysis within the climbing community. News of the Mongolian duo's death spreads like wildfire through base camps and online forums, sparking not tears, but fierce debate. The experts, the guides, the Himalayan veterans, they all look at this situation without any romanticism. They see not just a heroic achievement, but a fatal error in judgment, a mistake that should serve as a lesson to anyone who thinks they're invincible. The biggest question, the one that hangs in the air and haunts the professionals, is this. Why did they go without a radio? That small piece of plastic and circuitry weighs no more than 200 grams, about the same as a chocolate bar or a spare pair of socks. But for seasoned climbers, turning down that lifeline isn't a matter of principle. It's a foolishness that borders on madness. In a world where information is life itself, Usuk Jargal and Purev Surin voluntarily chose to go dark. Experts have run the simulations again and again, and the picture that emerges is terrifyingly simple. If they'd had a radio, just one sentence from base camp could have changed history. The expedition manager, seeing a cyclonic storm brewing on the satellite maps, would have screamed into the radio, "Get down now!" That one command, received in time, would have forced them to turn back before they spent their last ounce of energy on that final push to the summit. Sure, they wouldn't have gotten their summit photo, but they would have returned home to their families. But the radio was silent, and that silence became their death sentence. The incident with the Mongolian team exposes a terrifying paradox of modern-day Everest. This is the most crowded mountain on the planet. During the climbing season, you can barely move. Traffic jams of hundreds of people form on the fixed ropes. And yet, Usuk Jargal and Purev Surin managed to die in total isolation, right in the middle of a crowd. They died alone because they built an invisible wall around themselves, cutting off all communication with the outside world. This incident is a brutal reminder to everyone. At 8,000 meters, physical strength is no guarantee of survival. The Mongolian climbers proved their bodies were perfectly tuned machines. They did the impossible, ascending without supplemental oxygen into a place where all life dies. Their endurance was phenomenal. But the mountain doesn't attack your muscles. It attacks your hubris. Their words to the organizers at the start of the expedition, "We are professionals," now sound like a tragic epitaph. This tragedy becomes a grim textbook case. It shows that in the death zone, overestimating your own strength and ignoring safety protocols is a mistake the mountain never forgives, whether you're a rookie or a master. Everest always gets the final say, turning audacity into eternal silence on its snow-covered slopes. What's the price of a line on Wikipedia? For Anna Gutu and Gina Marie Rizuchidlo, the cost was their lives. Two rivals, one treacherous mountain, Shishapangma, and a frantic, toxic race for the title of the first American woman to conquer all 14 8,000ers. They were neck and neck, ignoring the pleas of their Sherpas and the mortal danger, turning high-altitude mountaineering into a game of Russian roulette. Why did ego drive these experienced climbers to their certain deaths, taking two others with them? This is a story of how ambition can become deadlier than any avalanche. Two women, one crown, and a deadly race for immortality. At stake wasn't just a summit, but the title of the first American woman to conquer all 14 of the planet's 8,000ers. Meet Anna Gutu and Gina Marie Rizuchidlo. Both had 13 of the giants under their belts. The score was tied, 13-13. Only one last push remained, the final boss, Shishapangma. This Tibetan peak is considered the lowest of the 8,000ers, but now it was becoming the most inaccessible fortress in the world. China had its borders on lockdown. The mountain was closed. Climbing seasons came and went in silence, and it seemed the race was on hold. But ambition, it has a way of opening any door. Right at the tail end of the season, just as the weather begins to whisper of winter, the Chinese authorities suddenly give the green light. The decision sends shockwaves through the climbing community. Permits are being issued, literally, at the 11th hour. Rumors start flying, spreading across the slopes faster than an avalanche. The talk is of colossal sums of money and intense political pressure. No one knows the exact figures, but the price tag for this climb is clearly way more than just the cost of gear. It's a one-way ticket for their bank accounts. And maybe for more than just that. Base camp, normally a place of camaraderie and support, transforms into a war zone. There's no room for friendly chats over tea. The air is so electric, you can practically feel the sparks. This isn't an expedition. It's a dead sprint in the death zone. The two women's teams don't even bother hiding their hostility. It's a toxic, cutthroat competition, where every look from a rival is taken as a challenge. They're in a literal race to the top, ignoring the cardinal rule of the high mountains. The peaks don't forgive haste. Both teams know they're out of time. The weather window is as narrow as the eye of a needle. Instead of a careful acclimatization and a thought-out strategy, it's just a mad dash for the summit. The guides, the Sherpas, the climbers themselves. Everyone is wound tight. Anna and Gina are neck and neck, and each one is convinced she's the one who deserves to write her name in the history books, completely unaware of the price the mountain will demand for crossing that finish line. The mountain has no pity, and it couldn't care less about your ambitions. After days of heavy snowfall, the slopes of Shishapangma have become a giant, unstable trap. There's a critical amount of new snow, and any experienced climber will tell you the same thing. You have to wait. It's the golden rule of the high peaks. Fresh snow needs to settle, to compact, to bond with the older, icy layer beneath. Normally, that takes 2 to 3 days of calm, sunny weather. To go now would be like walking through a minefield, where any step could be the one that sets it all off. But back at camp, a different kind of logic is taking hold. Anna and Gina Marie aren't looking at the snow conditions. They're looking at each other. The logic of safety is being shattered by the fear of being second. There's a nagging thought ringing in their heads. If I wait and she goes, I lose everything. It's a classic gambler's fallacy, where the stakes aren't chips, but their own lives. Both women flatly refuse to wait for the snow to consolidate. The pressure campaign begins on the very people responsible for their safety. The Sherpas, the absolute elite of high-altitude mountaineering, can see the danger clear as day. They can read the mountain like an open book, and they know the slope is overloaded. But here, the client isn't just a guest. They're a patron with immense resources and a non-negotiable deadline. The women are literally demanding to set out. They're pressuring their guides, using the argument that the other team is already packing up. It's a psychological duel where common sense is taking a back seat. The Sherpas, bound by their contracts and maybe fearing for their reputations or their paychecks, are caught in an impossible position. They have no choice but to give in. The teams start to gear up, ignoring all the warning signs. The record starts to matter more than reality. Instead of hunkering down in their tents with hot tea, waiting for the danger to pass, they choose to risk it all. The teams head out, stepping onto a fresh, treacherous layer of loose snow, clinging precariously to the steep slopes. The race is on, but it's no longer a test of skill. It's a game of chance. October 7th greets the climbers with that deceptive calm, the kind that so often comes before disaster. This morning was supposed to be a triumph, the finish line in a race years in the making. But the mountain had other plans. Both teams begin their final summit push, digging their crampons into a slope that's holding on by a thread. Anna Gutu and her guide, Mingmar Sherpa, are setting an incredible pace. It's as if Anna can feel her rival's breath on her neck. She pushes upward, ignoring the exhaustion. Her strategy pays off. She pulls ahead. Gutu's team climbs higher than their competitors, passing the 7,800-meter mark. The summit is tantalizingly close, just a few hundred vertical meters away. In that moment, it feels like the record is in the bag, that history is already being written in her name, but the physics of the snowpack are unforgiving. Suddenly, the slope comes alive. This isn't a slow slide, it's an instant fracture. A massive slab of snow, having lost its grip on the icy base, breaks loose. The first avalanche comes down, fast and brutal. Anna and Mingmar don't have a second to react, not the slightest chance to escape. The elements simply wipe them from the face of the mountain, extinguishing 2 lives in an instant. What was a triumphant ascent just a moment ago becomes a silent, white void. And further down the slope, or perhaps on a parallel traverse, the team of Gina Marie Rizuchidlo is still moving. About 2 hours pass after the first tragedy, 120 minutes of uncertainty and radio chaos. You'd think the mountain had already claimed its price, that the worst was over. But Shishapangma wasn't finished. A cascade of destruction has been set in motion. After those 2 fateful hours, a second avalanche strikes. It's even more powerful, more massive, and more destructive than the first. A huge mass of snow and ice thunders down, engulfing the route where Gina is. Caught with her in the icy trap is Tenjin Lama, a true superstar in the world of mountaineering. The very same guide who, just a couple of months earlier, had set a world speed record for ascents with Kristen Harila. But all of Tenjin's experience, his incredible instincts and strength, are no match for the fury of nature. The second wave buries them under tons of compacted snow. In a single day, separated by just a couple of hours, the race for a dream turns into a double tragedy, wiping out both teams and leaving nothing on the slope but the wind, sweeping away their tracks. The silence on the slope is louder than any cry for help. When the snow dust settles, the horrific reality is revealed. The finish line has become the final tally. The result of this insane race: 4 lives cut short, no medals, no triumphant interviews, just the cold, merciless count of the dead. Anna Gutu, Gina Marie, Mingmar Sherpa, and the 4th name on this list. It's one that sends a shockwave through the entire climbing world. Tenjin Lama. This wasn't just any guide. He was a superstar, a living legend, who had literally just rewritten the history of mountaineering. Together with Norwegian climber Kristen Harila, he'd summited all 14 of the world's highest peaks in a record-breaking 92 days. He was a machine, incredibly strong, incredibly wise. A man who had endured the most brutal storms on Everest and K2. But even his immense experience proved to be no match for someone else's ambition. The tragedy of Tenjin's death is a bitter irony. This seasoned professional didn't die because of a technical error or some sudden act of nature. He was killed by pressure. Tenjin became a hostage to his contract and to his client's relentless drive to be the first. He was forced to step onto a slope that was screaming danger, because in that world, a client's demands carry more weight than the laws of physics. The experts who later picked this incident apart came to a single, brutal conclusion. This tragedy wasn't a freak accident. It was 100% preventable. The mountain wasn't setting a trap. It was just asking for time. To save all 4 of those lives, all they had to do was the simplest thing in the world. Nothing. Just stay in camp. Wait for just a couple of days. The sun and wind would have done their work. The snow would have settled, bonded with the surface below, and the route would have transformed from a death trap into a standard, manageable trail. But on Anna and Gina's calendar, there was no room for those 2 days. This entire nightmare, all of this pain, happened because of a single line on the internet. The desire to claim the title of first American woman on a Wikipedia page proved stronger than the instinct for self-preservation. A title that would likely be forgotten within a year was deemed more valuable than a human life. Ego doesn't just push you to take risks. It blinds you, making you ignore the obvious. In the end, Shishapangma had the final say, reminding us all of a harsh truth. At 8,000 meters, vanity is the heaviest thing you can possibly carry in your pack. How could a man who spent years dancing with death, completely untethered, die because of 10 seconds he tried to save? In the Mexican canyon of El Potrero Chico, a tragedy unfolded that sent shockwaves around the globe. Legendary rock climber Brad Gobright and his partner, Aiden Jacobson, made a mistake so basic, it would be unforgivable even for a complete novice. Gravity doesn't care about world records, and that evening, it delivered its final verdict. So, why did 2 seasoned pros ignore a rule written in blood, turning a routine descent into a death trap? He lived his life on a razor's edge without a rope, yet it was a simple routine oversight that proved fatal. This is Brad Gobright. If you passed him on the street, You'd never guess you were looking at a superhero. He looked nothing like the polished, airbrushed athletes you see on magazine covers. Brad lived out of an old Honda, wore faded, worn-out clothes, and would skimp on food just to get one more day on the rock. In the climbing world, there's a name for people like him: dirtbags. And for Go-Bright, that's not an insult. It's a badge of honor. A sign that he belongs to a special tribe of the obsessed. But behind that humble, almost shy smile, there's an absolute machine. Yosemite, the legendary El Capitan. Go-Bright practically flies up its 1,000-foot sheer walls. Where other teams spend 3 days hanging on the wall, Brad blasts through in just a couple of hours, setting world speed records. But his true element is free solo. No ropes, no gear, just his fingertips, the rubber on his climbing shoes, and absolute mental control. He's used to living in a world where a single bad hold means the end, and he's more comfortable there than most of us are waiting in line for coffee. And that brings us to that fateful day. Brad isn't alone. He's with his climbing partner, Aiden Jacobson. They've just finished a seriously tough route. The two are standing on the summit, muscles buzzing with a satisfying ache as the sun begins to dip toward the horizon. They're exhausted, but completely elated. Mission accomplished. But the terrifying part is that for Go-Bright, this route wasn't a challenge. It was just a warm-up, a casual stroll to stretch his legs. His focus, usually laser sharp, is dangerously relaxed, because the hard part, or so they think, is already over. All that's left is the easy part. Just get back down to the car and grab some dinner. And it's in this exact moment, as the tension fades, that fate begins its countdown. We're in Mexico, at El Potrero Chico, where limestone walls shoot into the sky like stone skyscrapers, completely dominating the horizon. This place is a mecca for climbers from all over the world, but it's also a giant labyrinth where gravity patiently waits for the slightest mistake. Brad and Aiden want to get down fast. Dusk is setting in, and the camp lights and a well-earned rest are waiting for them below. To save time, they decide to use a technique called a simul rappel, or a simultaneous rappel. To the average person, this sounds insane. But for the pros, it's just a way to cut corners. Imagine a giant set of scales. The rope is draped through a metal anchor, bolted into the rock face hundreds of feet in the air. Brad is on one end of the rope, Aiden is on the other. They descend at the same time, their bodies acting as a counterbalance for each other. It's like a deadly dance. They work as counterweights. One guy's weight keeps the other from falling. This technique lets them get down twice as fast as the classic method, where one person waits for the other to reach the next anchor. The rope zips through their rappel devices. The metal heats up from the friction. Everything is working like clockwork. However, this incredible speed comes at a price. The whole system relies entirely on balance and mutual trust. If one of them suddenly takes their weight off the rope, say by stepping onto a ledge, or worse, if they fall, the other will immediately plummet. The rope will just zip right through that top anchor, and there would be absolutely no way to stop it. You are completely 100% dependent on the person at the other end of that line. This is where the golden rule comes into play, a rule forged by generations of climbers. Knots at the ends of the rope. It seems like such a small thing, just tying a simple knot at the very end of the line. But that small thing is your ultimate failsafe. Here's how it works. As you rappel, the rope slides through your device, a tube-style device or a grigri. If the rope turns out to be shorter than the descent, or if you lose control for a second, the end of the rope will just zip right through your device, and you'll be in free fall. But if there's a knot at the end, it physically can't pass through. It jams the mechanism, bringing your descent to an abrupt halt. That knot is your emergency brake. It's the only thing standing between a simple miscalculation and total disaster. In theory, Brad and Aiden know this better than the back of their hands. In any climbing school, forgetting to tie knots gets you kicked off the course. Immediately. It's climbing 101, the absolute bedrock of survival. The knots prevent the rope from slipping through your rappel device if you unexpectedly run out of line. But the problem with being a pro is that experience can play a cruel trick, swapping a healthy sense of fear for a dangerous complacency. When you've done something thousands of times, your brain starts to skip the basic safety checks, writing them off as a waste of time. Twilight in the mountains is deceptive. It swallows distance and dulls your focus, a time when every step feels right, and every shadow looks like solid ground. As the light fades, the world loses its definition. Brad and Aiden are in a hurry. They need to get down, fast. And in that rush, they do something that will later be called a legend's error. They skip the one critical step we just talked about. The guys don't tie knots in the ends of their rope. Maybe they're worried the knots will get snagged in the thick thorny bushes covering the slopes of El Potrero Chico. Or maybe they're just a little too confident in their ability to judge the distance. Whatever the reason, the ends of the rope are left free, like an open ending to a story no one intended to write. They begin to set up the rappel. And that's when the second mistake happens, hidden by the dim light. The rope isn't centered, the midpoint is off. One end of the rope is hanging several meters lower than the other. Picture the laces on your shoes when you've pulled them through unevenly. One loop is huge, the other is tiny. Except here, instead of your shoes, there's a bottomless chasm below. Brad clips into the short end of the rope, and Aiden clips into the long one. In the fading light, they don't see it. The rope disappears down into the darkness, lost among the foliage and rock ledges, creating the illusion that both ends have reached the next anchor station. They push off from the wall. The descent begins. The mechanism works, the soft hiss of the rope sliding through their devices. The two men move in perfect sync, a single unit trusting their weight to each other. The wind whistles in their ears, masking any other sound. Everything seems to be going to plan. But physics is relentless. Brad's side of the rope is running out fast, while Aiden still has plenty to spare. And then suddenly, this deadly dance is cut short. Brad hits the end of his rope. No warning, no jolt. With no stop or knot, the end of the rope just slips through Brad's rappel device with a soft pop. The counterbalance system, holding them both over the abyss, instantly fails. It's like in a game of tug-of-war, when your opponent suddenly vanishes. The tension is gone in a fraction of a second. Brad loses all support. There's nothing holding him anymore. He falls backward into the black void of the canyon, plummeting some 300 meters. In that same instant, Aiden, having lost his counterbalance, falls too. Gravity yanks him downward, but fate gives him a chance it denied Brad. Aiden crashes through some tough bushes and slams into a small ledge just below. The impact is brutal. He's injured, but he's alive. The rope, now free from his partner's weight, falls beside him like a useless snake. The silence that follows is more deafening than any scream. It's all over in an instant. The legendary master of the vertical world lies motionless in the dust at the very foot of the wall. Rescuers and other climbers who make their way down to the base of the route find his body deep in the dead of night. News of Brad Gobright's death spreads through the climbing world like wildfire. The community is stunned. Group chats are blowing up with messages of disbelief. Everyone expects to hear that he fell on some impossibly difficult solo climb, pulling off a stunt beyond human limits. But the truth turns out to be far more bitter and absurd. The master who had danced with death for years, climbing without a rope, dies during a simple rappel, a procedure any beginner learns in their very first lesson. It's like a Formula One driver who takes corners at 300 kilometers an hour, crashing while pulling out of a supermarket parking lot. Experts would later label the cause of this tragedy with a professional term: complacency, a dangerous self-assurance. It's a trap that the best of the best fall into. When you do something thousands of times, your brain stops perceiving it as a threat. Fear gets dulled, giving way to autopilot. Brad and Aiden were so confident in their skills, in their feel for the rope and the rock, that they simply skipped a crucial safety check. They trusted their intuition where they should have trusted the protocol. The most heartbreaking detail of this story is the time. Tying two simple knots in the ends of the rope takes exactly 10 seconds. 1, 2, and the knot is done. 10 seconds. The difference between a living legend and an obituary in a magazine. 10 seconds they decided to save, just to get to dinner a little faster. That tiny saving of time came at a price that can never be repaid. Now, years later, this incident has become a grim cornerstone in the training of new generations. In climbing schools from Yosemite to the Alps, instructors begin their lectures with Brad's story. His name is mentioned not just as a tribute to his records, but as a stark warning. Instructors hammer one simple truth into their students' heads: the mountains don't care who you are. Gravity is the most impartial judge in the world. It doesn't check your social media followers. It doesn't look at your world records. And it won't cut you any slack for being tired. Physics doesn't care if you're a rookie or a legend. Break the law of gravity, and the sentence is immediate. And there are no appeals. You might be able to dance your way up a cliff face, but you fall down just like everybody else. Have you ever watched someone broadcast their own death live? Thousands of people were glued to their screens as a routine live stream became a real-time recording of a plunge into the void. In October, Mount Fuji becomes an icy killer, but an unemployed Japanese man named Tetsuya, who went by the handle Tedzu online, decided the rules didn't apply to him. He went live on the platform Nikoniko, armed with nothing but a smartphone and a dangerous amount of confidence. Little did he know that in just a few minutes, his only audience would be death itself, and that the hands holding his phone would cost him his final chance to be saved. So, why did experienced climbers feel a chill run down their spine the moment they saw his gear? And what fateful words did he speak just a second before his world became a frantic tumble of snow and sky? Let's go to Tokyo. This is where we meet Tetsuya, a 47-year-old man with a lot of time on his hands and not much adventure in his life. He's unemployed, loves the internet, and enjoys long walks. Online, he goes by the handle Tedzu. Tetsuya decides that the local parks are getting boring. He needs a challenge. He needs Fuji. But he overlooks one critical detail that changes everything. You see, Fuji is a mountain with two faces. In the summer, it's a tourist postcard, where grandmothers and school children snake their way to the summit to greet the dawn. But in October, the mountain closes its doors. The official climbing season ends way back in September. The infrastructure is shut down, the rescue stations are empty, and the trails are blocked by barriers reading "Entry Prohibited." From October to July, this place is ruled by snow, gale-force winds, and ice as hard as concrete. Tetsuya ignores the signs. He steps right over the barrier. In his mind, the rules are for other people. Now, take a closer look at him. For an experienced climber, one glance at the screen is enough to send a shiver down their spine. Tetsuya's gear is a death sentence. He has no professional stiff-soled winter boots, no ice axe, no helmet. His clothes look like something you'd wear for a fall jog in the park, not for tackling Japan's highest peak in the off-season. But that's not even the most terrifying part. Look at his hands. This is the key to the entire story. In the mountains, your hands are your lifeline. They're supposed to be gripping an ice axe, or a safety line. But Tetsuya's hands are busy. In one, he's clutching a trekking pole. In the other, a smartphone. He's live streaming on the Nikoniko platform. He's sacrificing his ability to balance, his ability to self-arrest if he falls, all for the sake of keeping his viewers in the loop. That smartphone has become the most dangerous thing he's carrying. Tetsuya keeps climbing higher. The wind is picking up, turning into a howling gale that's trying to tear him from the slope. The incline gets steeper, reaching a critical angle. Under his feet, it's no longer rock, but a slippery crust of ice dusted with fresh snow. The viewers in the chat can see the camera shaking. They can hear his ragged breaths. And then, Tetsuya starts to complain. He speaks right into his mic. "My fingers are frozen. They're aching from the cold." He doesn't have the kind of warm gloves that could protect him from the wind at this altitude. He tries to warm his hands, still clutching his phone, and adds, "It's dangerous up here. This isn't just for show. It's a simple statement of fact, one he doesn't seem to fully grasp himself." He keeps pushing upward, fueled by adrenaline and the comments on his screen, completely unaware that the mountain has already laid a trap for him. A trap you can't escape without two free hands. At 3,700 meters, one wrong step turns life into the pure physics of a fall. Tetsuya is just a few hundred meters from the crater he's so desperate to reach. But it's right here that Mount Fuji decides to show its true nature. This isn't a hike anymore. It's a balancing act on a knife's edge. And under his feet, it's not soft snow, but what the Japanese call tsuru tsuru, a mirror-smooth sheet of ice, polished by the wind. The smartphone in his hand keeps broadcasting to the world. His viewers see a narrow trail, and on this stretch, there are no safety railings at all. In the summer, this path is lined with posts and guide ropes, but now, there's nothing. Just an endless white slope, dropping away at a 30, sometimes even 40-degree angle. It's the perfect sledding hill, except the finish line isn't a soft pile of snow, but the jagged rocks at the bottom. And this is where Tetsuya makes a fatal mistake. Instead of gluing his eyes to every inch of the path ahead, he keeps looking at his screen. He's reading the chat, reacting to the hearts and questions from his followers. His attention is torn between the virtual world on his phone and the icy hell surrounding him in real life. He's literally walking along the edge of a cliff while looking in the rearview mirror. And then, a heavy silence falls over the stream, broken only by his ragged breathing and the howl of the wind in the mic. Tetsuya feels the ground give way beneath him. He says the words that will become his digital epitaph. "This is getting dangerous. Whoa, I'm slipping." His voice is surprisingly calm. There's no terror in it, more like a sudden, awkward realization. But a second later, his tone shifts. The world on the screen flips upside down. The viewers can no longer see the trail. Instead, the frame is a frantic blur of bright blue sky, blinding white snow, and the soles of Tetsuya's boots. There's a growing scraping sound, the sound of his clothes dragging across the icy crust. The uncontrolled slide has begun. On a slope this steep, you can accelerate to the speed of a car in just a few seconds. Without an ice axe, stopping is impossible. His fingers just scrape helplessly against the ice, finding no purchase. Tetsuya becomes a human projectile, and the stream is still live. Incredibly, the smartphone is still live, its camera capturing a chaotic, spinning world. On the other side of the screen, viewers are frozen in stunned silence. Someone types "stop" into the chat. Another, "hang on," but they don't realize. Gravity has already passed its sentence. With every passing moment, the speed increases, and any chance of survival evaporates. Suddenly, the image freezes. There's a sharp, dry crack, the sound of the phone being ripped from his grasp and smashing against rock or hard-packed ice. The picture becomes a still life, a blur of snow and a sliver of gray sky. The audio cuts out. All that's left is a silence that, for thousands of people online, is louder than any scream. The stream doesn't end. It just becomes a window into the void, a place where, thousands of feet above sea level, a human life has just been cut short. Across Japan, thousands of people sit frozen, staring at the silent, static image on their screens, the sound of that final, brutal impact still ringing in their ears. A moment of confusion gives way to pure, primal horror. The chat on the Nikoniko platform explodes with a flood of messages. But instead of the usual likes and jokes, there's now only one question, repeated over and over. Is he alive? The viewers who moments ago were just along for a risky adventure have suddenly become real-time witnesses to a tragedy. Emergency lines in the Shizuoka and Yamanashi prefectures are inundated with calls. People from all over the country are calling the police, trying to explain the unbelievable to dispatchers. We just watched someone fall from the summit of Mount Fuji on a live stream. The situation is surreal. Police take call after call, noting the approximate coordinates that viewers are trying to pinpoint from the stream's final frames. But the mountain dictates the terms. Approaching darkness and gale force winds make an immediate rescue operation impossible. Tetsuya is left on the slope, alone with the freezing darkness. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight touch the snow-capped peak, a rescue helicopter takes to the air. Experienced mountaineers and rescuers begin to comb the slope, well aware of how treacherous this terrain can be. They know that when someone falls on what the locals call tsuru-tsuru, a slick, icy crust, there's nothing to stop the slide until the slope flattens out, or until you hit rock. The search party finds what's left of the streamer at an altitude of about 3,000 meters. Let those numbers sink in. Tetsuya fell nearly 700 vertical meters. That's a distance comparable to 2 Burj Khalifas stacked on top of each other. Here, the slope is a giant crater of frozen volcanic ash and sharp rocks. His body is found in a horrific state. At that speed, hitting the outcrops and rocks, the human body doesn't stand a chance of remaining intact. Experts would later confirm that death was instantaneous, occurring during the fall itself. The tragedy spreads like wildfire online, and even though the platform's administrators move quickly to take the recording down, the video has already gone viral. It turns into a terrifying tutorial watched by millions. Journalists and professional climbers all say the same thing. For Tetsuya, the smartphone in his hand was a death sentence. The main and most brutal lesson of this story is that in extreme conditions, the smallest detail can be fatal. Without an ice axe, he had no way to perform a self-arrest, a technique where a climber throws all their weight onto the tool, digging it into the ice to stop a slide. Tetsuya had no tool, no skills, and not even a free hand. He traded his only point of support for the Go Live button. The whole world watched as the modern thirst for digital validation collided with the indifferent ancient power of nature, a power that doesn't forgive amateurs. Mount Fuji reminded everyone, once again, that it's not a backdrop for a live stream. It's a brutal force of nature, where the price of a single frame is a human life, one click for recognition, and an eternity in an icy oblivion. Tetsuya didn't just die, he became an icon of pointless death in the age of likes. His story is an indictment of modern society, where being live is more important than being safe. Tetsuya's real killer wasn't the ice, it was the illusion of control. Sitting in our cozy apartments, we get used to the world on our screens obeying our commands. Tetsuya carried that feeling with him onto the slopes of Fuji. The chat, the flying hearts, the comments, they all created a false sense of security. It seemed to him that as long as the camera was on, he was the main character in a movie, someone who couldn't possibly die in the middle of the story. But the mountain doesn't read the chat. It doesn't care about your views or your ratings. This is where brutal physics takes over. A smartphone in your hand is a lock on the door to survival. To survive a fall, a climber has to self-arrest, drop onto their stomach, and dig into the slope. But Tetsuya's hands were occupied. He clutched his phone to the very end, as if it could somehow hold him up. He chose the stream over his life, blocking his only chance to get a grip on reality. And that is the ultimate irony. Tetsuya climbed to the summit to show the world its beauty, but all he revealed was his own fragility. Instead of a majestic sunrise, thousands of people saw chaos, fear, and an ending you can't rewind. He wanted to be a guide to a world of beauty, but instead, he became a case study in a survival manual. Fuji's final lesson is simple and merciless. Nature is not a set for your vlog. It doesn't need your attention. The mountains have been here for millions of years, and they don't care how many people are watching you fall. Tetsuya paid the ultimate price to remind us of one thing. When you're standing on the edge of an abyss, your phone belongs in your pocket, and your life belongs in your own two hands.